Comics, comics.
We like
Comics, 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 comics.
because they have no home.
Joe's Pool Hall, and I'm Joe Pool.
And I am a patriot. I have seen the coming of the glory of the Lord. And this is the podcast We Like Comics, because they have no bones. Find us on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast, or on Blue Sky Social, because we are moonlighting our X page currently at, I think it's bluesky.bonelesscomics1, or you can just search for Boneless Comics 1.
Boneless Comics 1. That's right. We are a clean comic book podcast where we chat about comics from Marvel, DC, IDW, Dark Horse, Image, and more. That's right. So you can find extra content on bonelesscomicspodcast.com. You can also look for our after shows and bonus content on our YouTube channel, Boneless Comics Podcast. And don't forget to hit subscribe and click the notification bell to get all the updates. And I'm doing a very emphatic dancing Deadpool in the YouTube video, so you should come on over and check it out.
Yes, all of our podcasts are enhanced on YouTube, and you can see all the goofiness going on.
Because I dress like a duck! Yay!
That you may not be able to hear necessarily in the audio. So everybody go check that out on our YouTube channel. My artwork for this episode is literally Hawkeye with his arm around his buddy Wade Wilson. And there's an arrow all the way through Wade's head, which fortunately doesn't kill him, which we'll find out when we get to the character section of this episode. So
nice.
There you go.
All right, well, let's get into our review of Hawkeye versus Deadpool, written by Gerry Duggan with art by Matteo Lolli and Jacopo Camagni, published in 2015 by Marvel Comics.
You know, one thing I want to say right off the bat before we get started is that I said last time that I was going to look up the pronunciation for these names, and I absolutely did not do that. So we're just going to stumble through.
We're just winging it.
If it's, we're just winging it.
We're just winging it.
If it's Jacopo Campagna or something different, sorry. We're trying our best to get it right without doing any research. So what I did do research on, though, is the characters for this story. So the characters for this story, first of all, we have Hawkeye, and I'm sorry I didn't start with the other one, Mr. Poole, but Clint Barton is Hawkeye, the down-on-his-luck ex-supervillain turned Avenger. He's an expert marksman and fights primarily using a bow and arrow, as well as occasionally using a large stable of trick arrows. Barton grew up in the circus, was trained by criminals, and eventually joined the ranks of the Avengers after the initial roster disbanded. So if you're reading like the early Stan Lee days of the Avengers, you've got kind of the first team where you've got like the Hulk, I think Ant-Man and the Wasp were there. You've also got Iron Man, Thor. A lot of those guys leave, and the second roster was Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Captain America. And so that's when you get Hawkeye as part of the team. And I'm getting the signal from my my co-host that we need to move on here. So Hawkeye is so accurate with a bow that he never misses, although he himself gets hit a lot too. So that's kind of something that we'll get into. He's not really the Avenger that you want to save you necessarily, because he gets beat up a lot. So we also have, yeah, there you go. We also have Deadpool, also known as the Merc with a Mouth. Deadpool is a mutant with the same incredible healing factor as Wolverine, although it was artificially installed in him by Department K of the Weapon X program. And while he originally wore like gray, he's kind of slowly become more heroic over the years as he regained his conscience, mostly due to the inversion spell during the Axis event. So that's kind of where we're at in continuity now. So if you notice that he's not slicing people up like he did in the movies, that might have something to do with why.
And playing with people's skeletons.
Yeah, exactly. But for more detailed info on Deadpool, you can actually just check out our Deadpool Secret Invasion review that we did either last year or the year before, because that really covers his character pretty well. So we also have Kate Bishop. Kate Bishop is Hawkeye's protege and sometimes his superior. Kate herself is an expert markswoman. She's a founding member of the Young Avengers, and she originally began her heroic activities without any affiliation with Hawkeye himself. So I think when she started, she had like some of Mockingbird's gear, some of Hawkeye's gear, and she just combined all of it to make her own thing. And I'm really distracted by what you're doing right now. However, she eventually did join Hawkeye as his close friend, ally, and fellow hero, proving herself worthy of the name Hawkeye. And honestly, I looked at the bios on the Marvel Wiki, and if you watch the Hawkeye series on Disney Plus, like they changed some of the details, but even down to the fact that like El Matador is involved in her origin, yeah, like they pretty much hit all the high points of it in the Hawkeye TV series. So there you go.
Nice.
So moving along, we have Jeremy Elsden. So he's a new character for this story. He is a computer hacker who's stolen the complete human resources files of every SHIELD agent for reasons that we don't ever find out. This makes him a target for multiple crime syndicates, including the Black Cat.
So he actually, I believe, was part of a group that wanted to steal this information and use it for nefarious purposes, but then when he got it, he had second thoughts and decided that he needed to give it back. So I think he gained a conscience, and that's why he made that change. So it was like he got into it for the fun of hacking, and then once he had the files, he was like, oh crap, I need to protect this. This is important. This could have ramifications.
This could actually really hurt people. Well, he does say in the beginning of the story, I don't want anybody to get killed, which seems like a likely outcome of that info getting in the wrong hands. So we also have this character, actually, I'm pretty excited about because I like Daredevil, and we haven't featured this character in any of the stories that we've reviewed so far, but Typhoid Mary. She is Mary Walker, a mutant who has often served as one of Kingpin's low-level enforcers. And she possesses a measure of psychic and psionic abilities, from the ability to start mind fires, move small objects, and even disturb the minds of her opponents. Due to her affiliation with the Kingpin, she's often come into conflict with Daredevil, but due to her severe psychosis, however, she often alternates between trying to kill Daredevil or helping him or even thinking that she's in love with him. So she's like I would say that Deadpool is crazy, but Typhoid Mary is like on another, like she's not somebody that can function in society at all. So whereas Deadpool just kind of annoys people with his psychosis, like she's actually dangerous. So
yeah, her accidents start fires, and she's got like telekinesis that can cause issues too.
Yeah, like she's very out there.
Well, it seems like she also is switching between trying to kill Deadpool or helping him as well.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's kind of a similar thing going on there with Daredevil and Deadpool. And I don't know if she's mistaking one for the other or what that's about.
It seemed like she had some kind of romantic interest in him at one point as well. So that was interesting. But the last couple of characters we have, one of them, as far as I know, doesn't have any previous continuity. He is Dr. Lusk, the creator of an incredible program of indoctrination and mind control used to make drones out of anyone he can get his hands on. So the song that I sang at the beginning is an old hymn, an old church hymn, but the drones that he makes actually sing that, and they keep saying, I am a patriot throughout the story. So Dr. Lusk is amoral, and he kind of looks like Dr. Wily, and he is willing to sell his knowledge and his drones to the highest bidder, which kind of makes him an antagonist for our heroes. And then finally, we have the Black Cat, who is Felicia Hardy, and she was originally just a cat burglar and sort of an on-again, off-again paramour for Spider-Man. However, with her incredible acrobatic abilities and her bad luck aura, which actually she can turn people's luck against them, she's risen to become a powerful crime boss in her own right. So this is different than Domino. Domino has good luck for herself. Black Cat causes bad luck in other people. So I realize it seems similar, but it's like totally different. So yeah, and those are pretty much the main characters that you need to know about for our story today.
All right. So now we're going to talk about the story itself, which begins actually at Halloween, not Christmas. So during the time that we are recording, it is almost Christmas, and I'm wearing it is the season to be amazing shirt underneath my Deadpool. So I'm a double fan person here, fanboy. Anyway,
and I'm not on theme at all because I have like every pose of Kirby from the NES game on my shirt.
Well, that's a shirt that sucks.
That's right. Okay. Well, everyone on my shirt sucks. So
exactly.
There you go.
All the iterations of Kirby. All right. Yes. So and not Jack Kirby. Different Kirby.
Not Jack Kirby.
Yes,
Different Kirby.
exactly. All right, so our story begins at Halloween, where Clint is dressed as Ultron, of all things. Why would you dress as Ultron? Like, you're just asking for trouble doing that. But hey, he's got a sense of
I
humor.
had that question too.
Yeah, that's what he ends up doing. So he's approached by a man named Jeremy Elsden, or Elsden, who needs to give vital information to the Avengers. But Clint refuses because he thinks this guy is just another one of the usual nuts that comes to see him. Because, if you want to see the Avengers, you seek out Captain America or, one of those guys, Iron Man, but you don't go for Hawkeye. He's just a regular street guy. So he's like, this is probably some crazy person. Shuts the door on him. But on his way out, Jeremy bumps into Deadpool and dumps his candy along with the USB drive in Wade's candy bag because he thinks that this is another superhero person and it's just safer in their hands than it is in his hands. So he dumps it in Wade's candy bag. So after he goes Magic Mike to get into his Deadpool outfit, he discovers that Jeremy actually has been shot. So they caught up to him, they shot him, killed him on the street. And it was done by somebody who was dressed as the Punisher, who utters that phrase, "I am a patriot." So that's the first time we get to hear that phrase said, or see it written on the page and translate it to sound in our brains because we're imagining. It's imagine time.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
So Hawkeye tells Deadpool to take a hike, and then he gets ambushed by someone dressed as Daredevil. So now we have two of them. And, of course, Daredevil also says, "I'm the Patriot," and actually goes further and starts to sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic, as Mike was doing earlier, because he also has been hypnotized, because he wouldn't do this podcast with me otherwise. No, just kidding.
I am a drone.
Exactly. Deadpool's injured. He references MJ with, "Go get him, Tiger!" And Hawkeye goes after them, only for the fake Punisher to self-terminate by walking in front of a moving bus. So these guys are not only programmed to fight and retrieve this USB drive, but if captured, they will self-terminate. So this is serious business that we, all of a sudden get here in the first couple pages of our comic today. So after they stop for some hot dogs, the dynamic duo start putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and Deadpool discovers that the USB drive in his Halloween candy has a recording of Jeremy, who's basically talking about how he's stolen these HR files. It contains the information of every single active SHIELD agent, and then this kicks off a short-lived internal conflict where Hawkeye says, "I'm going to handle this alone, you need to get out of here," and it escalates into a fist fight. So that's where we actually have Deadpool, or Hawkeye versus Deadpool, is kind of in this one moment. But really the overall comic is not about that, as you'll learn shortly. So we learn about Black Cat. She's in charge of the mysterious plot to steal the USB drive and replace the Avengers with drones. So they actually also not just Avengers, but they create a drone of a judge, and they use her during a trial to release Typhoid Mary on her own reconnaissance. So I think that Black Cat and Typhoid Mary have been have been working together for a while, and Typhoid Mary got busted, and so this is kind of her digging her out so we can use her for the story.
So I want to note that even the defense for Typhoid Mary objected whenever she was released on her own recognizance. The defense is like, wait, I object too.
So after this, Hawkeye and Deadpool, they get tired, and they eventually call a truce. And then that's when Kate Bishop shows up to check on Clint, see how things are going. She digs Deadpool's costume since, it is Halloween after all, because he takes off his mask and he's got his Deadpool face that's horribly, scarred, as Deadpool does, which my face is not like that. It is actually very clean and freshly shaven, so not like Deadpool at all in that way. But anyway,
this is the part of the podcast where we stroke our beards.
Yes. So
thoughtfully.
So Clint, lets her in that, that's actually his real face. That's not a Freddy Krueger mask. It's not for Halloween. That literally is his face. And so she sees it and she makes this disgusted face. She's like, "Oh yeah, great." And then she's like, "Oh, it's horrible." And we can talk about the art a little bit later, but there's some moments like that are really funny that I think we need to talk about. But moving on to our story. So the two basically go to investigate. Kate watches the recording. She figures out what's going on. They are attacked by more doppelgangers, and Kate finds Deadpool's contact within S.H.I.E.L.D. So they join a briefing together along with the FBI to discuss, okay, what are we going to do about this situation? So they decide we're going to set a trap for Black Cat and her goons, but instead of drones, Black Cat sends Typhoid Mary and some henchmen in first to contend with Deadpool and Kate, while Black Cat herself goes after Clint, who seems to be having a lot of bad luck lately, either because that's just Clint and that's how he is, or because Black Cat's in the story. It's kind of hard to tell. And they actually make a point of that in the story later, too. So basically, they are able to escape, leaving our trio to clean up the mess. So then they go and do some more investigating, and Jeremy actually had a cat. So they went to go find out what happened to his little furry friend because nobody was able to find the cat anywhere. So they canvass the apartment. They finally stumble upon this old lady who has the cat, and the cat has the thumb drive or the USB drive on its collar. So the galaxy is on Orion's belt from Men in Black is kind of the reference I guess we get here.
I didn't make that connection, but you're absolutely right.
I'm like, of course it's on Orion's belt. So they recover the thumb drive. Everything's great, except Hawkeye goes, I am a patriot. And he knocks out Kate and Deadpool and escapes with the drive. So then Black Cat goes to access the information, start to download it. Kate, who gets a rocket launcher from Deadpool, because, you know, he starts supplying all kinds of fun weapons. It's like, you'll do fine. Hey, you have good accuracy, which is a good point. Like, why use bow and arrows when you could shoot a rocket launcher? With your accuracy and aim, you would hit your target, like, much easier. But, you know, again, she doesn't want to splat people. She just wants to wing them with arrows and send them to jail. So Deadpool's like, no, we're doing this my way. Here's a rocket launcher. She blows up a nearby electrical substation, which shuts off electricity to the computer and conveniently snaps Hawkeye out of his trance, because I guess he isn't in deep enough that the bright lights and explosions kind of push him out of it. So then they're pinned.
Yeah, they actually justified that within the story.
Yeah.
I think there was a line about where he was like, I wasn't able to complete his conditioning.
Yeah,
or something.
Exactly.
I just, when you said that was the only Hawkeye versus Deadpool moment earlier, I did want to bring up, it does happen here too, because Hawkeye is mind controlled. So then they have to fight him again.
True.
So there is a little bit more.
A little bit. But then it's Hawkeye versus Deadpool and Hawkeye, because Kate's there too.
Right.
So anyway, so he and Kate get pinned under fire from Black Cat and her team, and then Deadpool shows up wearing the classic Hawkeye outfit with like the big quick man thing on his helmet or hood or whatever. And he's also riding this Skycycle that Hawkeye used to have in the olden days. But it has a busted stabilizer, and Deadpool doesn't know about it, can't fix it, so he goes soaring off in a burst of flame and had a pretty lame rescue attempt there. But anyway, the villains eventually do get knocked out. The thumb drive with the stolen information gets recovered. The hypnotist actually gets killed with a little help from Black Cat's bad luck. And Black Cat herself is arrested by S.H.I.E.L.D., except she somehow in when we flash from her scene back to our heroes, back to Black Cat, in that time period, she put a wig on the officer that arrested her and hypnotized that officer into taking her place, so then Black Cat could escape. So I don't know if she had this escape plan kind of pre-programmed from the beginning, or if it was a last-minute thing, but Black Cat escapes. And that's pretty much the end of our story right there. So we'll take a short break, and then we'll be right back to discuss.
All right.
With this collar on, my superpower is just unbridled cancer. Give me a bow and arrow, I'm basically Hawkeye.
I'm all out of arrows. I don't have any more. So, I guess I'm done, right? You know?
There are 100,000 aliens out there.
And I killed 11 of them. You're welcome.
Well, welcome back, everybody. So to start us off, I mean, I've obviously got some questions because I'm not as well versed in Marvel, or I should say this corner of Marvel as you are. So first of all, you already mentioned it, but I was right away just like, what is he doing when he was dressed up as Ultron at the beginning of the story? Because I'm like, this is like one of their worst foes. And I think the like giant Ultron army is actually what killed Hawkeye during Avengers Disassembled in our first episode. So I was like, wow, like that's really seems like it's in bad taste or whatever. And he's like a horrible, horrible villain of theirs. But it was funny. And there was definitely a lot of humor, like at the beginning of the issue as well. involving sort of misunderstandings with the size of the candy that Clint was going to have for everybody, because I guess he had full-size candy bars last year, but this year they're all fun size. And he's like, they're fun, see? And all the kids are like, that's never fun. You get half a candy bar. Like, which I
because
kind of agree.
They're
honestly.
talking about it up until that point because they're like, "Oh, let's go stop by that Hawkeye's place because he always gives out the full size candy bars." And then like Deadpool sees him and he's like, "Oh, dude, you got any full size candy bars for me this year?" Like everybody's just like, "Yeah, Clint's the man. He always gets the full size candy bars." And he's like, "Here you go." And they're like, "What's this? These are fun size. This will not do."
Yeah. So everybody's already like annoyed with it. And I did feel like this kind of continued the characterization that I expected for Hawkeye of sort of he's sort of like the down on his luck guy that just lives in this crappy apartment and like, yeah, he's an Avenger, but he doesn't really have a whole lot to show for it kind of thing. And that feels like kind of where we left off with him after Matt Fraction's run. So I felt very comfortable with like understanding what was going on with Clint Barton. Right. What I didn't feel comfortable with was Deadpool, because he has apparently kids. He has like a wife, and I guess she's a robot or life model decoy or something, and all of this stuff. And I'm just like, and there are ghosts that live in his apartment. Like I know nothing of any of this. So
yeah, so he has a daughter, and it is his biological daughter. But he mostly leaves her with shield agents and people in protective custody, because essentially it's that anti-hero superhero thing that if people learn about him, now his daughter's a target. So it kind of seems like most of the stories that she's in, she's a plot point essentially for him to have a conscience, for him to care, for him to be a little more careful, for him to have something to lose because he has this daughter.
Sure.
So that's kind of largely, I think most of the issues that I've read is what, what she's more of a plot device than actually like, more than anything else. Okay. Like she doesn't seem to have a lot of character development or anything like that. So,
I see.
It's neat because like we start this comic off and it's like, just a typical day. I mean, it is Halloween, but it's like a typical day in Hawkeye's life where he is, disappointing people and getting grumpy, and then something happens and he makes an impulsive decision because he's in a bad mood. And now it has consequences that we see throughout the rest of our story. And I felt like that was a very Matt Fraction thing to do with Hawkeye. And then kind of same with Deadpool, where it's like, he's trying to do, just a normal person thing. He's going trick-or-treating with his daughter. He's got the shield agent there. Everybody's having a good time and he's joking. And then he stumbles upon something that's Avengers business or shield business, and he inserts himself into the situation. So pretty typical for both characters. And then, of course, Kate shows up to pick up the pieces like, Clint, what have you got yourself into now, basically?
Yeah.
Who's this guy with the Freddy Krueger mask?
If I didn't know that this was by a different writer, I would have almost thought like, oh, it's just Matt Fraction continuing his run. And I mean that as like a praiseworthy thing, because that means that Gerry Duggan has really kept his characterization consistent with what's come before. And Fraction's run is pretty much like the defining run for that character for this era, or for the like kind of like modern comic book era. So it makes sense to kind of continue, the story beats and stuff from there. One thing that I actually can't stand that happens a lot, I don't know how often it happens at Marvel, but whenever DC has like any kind of company-wide event and they switch creative teams on a book, it seems like a lot of times they will reset their heroes to status quo and not necessarily pick up the threads from the previous writers. And I really hate that, because it's like, well, we've built all these stories. Like, let's see where we go from here. So it was really nice that since I have read Fraction's run, that I felt like I was just kind of picking up where I left off. Like Kate was still there kind of picking up Clint's messes, and he was still trying to make ends meet, and really seems like he just wants to be left alone, but can't ever have that for whatever reason. So it was just like fun seeing these characters again, because I do have that history with them.
Right.
So
and that does speak comic volumes for a writer that I don't believe has actually written for Hawkeye before. he's written a lot of Deadpool, and you'll find out more about this in the after show when you go back to YouTube. But basically, he's written a lot of Deadpool, but he hasn't really written any Hawkeye. So for him to bring these two characters together and do Hawkeye so well, I was kind of thinking like, either we should get him writing Hawkeye, or we should, or did he actually have creative input like from Matt Fraction, like how would he actually write this? Because he's not credited in the book. Matt Fraction isn't credited as a writer, so he probably didn't have involvement with it. But it really, like you said, it felt like it matched the tone and how the character is handled in his comics, brought it into this team up book.
Yeah, it was really nice because it didn't feel like sometimes when you're switching creative teams entirely, you feel that shift very strongly towards the beginning of a run. And I mean, this is a mini series. It's not like an ongoing, but still,
right.
Issues 0 through 4 or whatever for this series. But it felt like just a continuation of what had come before, which was really nice. It was very comfortable. And even the stuff with Deadpool that I was like, okay, so like he's married, or he has a daughter, like what's going on there? Even that stuff didn't really detract from me understanding the story at all.
Right.
It was just kind of like, oh, okay, he has a different status quo than I've been used to. Sure, that's probably what's happening in his book. You know.
Although I will say there was probably at least one surprise where you're like, what the heck? And then they didn't do anything with it, which is, this is actually, it's kind of hard to see with the lights, but this is a ghost of Benjamin Franklin. And
so why does he have ghosts living in his apartment?
So I actually don't have the issues where they appear. I have the issues like in the next volume where they're just kind of still there hanging around having a bootastic good ghost time. But basically,
bootastic?
they're I don't know. That's my guess at a ghost joke. Bootastic. But anyway, So basically the presidents are showing up as ghosts, and there's some story that he has to go through in order to banish them, fight them. It's like kind of like a Marvel Zombies thing, except it's ghost and it's dead presidents. But
it's dead president.
But then they kind of stick around in his house, and it's kind of weird because they just pop up randomly here or there. So it's kind of neat for him to like show that like this is what goes on in Deadpool's apartment. Like people sit around and play video games, they have a good time, and sometimes a naked ghost walks through, or Benjamin Franklin comes through the wall and has to give his 2 cents on what's going on, and that's just a day in the life of Deadpool.
What was it? It was like a wizard or something. He like appears and then he just like strips in front of everybody, and I'm like, what is happening? So yeah, that was a reference that was lost on me, but I definitely figured that it was established in some previous run. So is Gerry Duggan or Duggan, however it's, I want to say Duggan because Dum Dum Dugan is one of the Howling Commandos from Nick Fury.
That's
but maybe
what I was thinking too.
Either way.
But maybe it's Duggan because there are 2 G's.
There's 2 G's. Yeah. Was he the writer on Deadpool at this time?
Yes.
Or around this time? So that makes sense. So they were just like, here, you're doing this miniseries. And I have read something previous by him. I believe he wrote at least 1 volume of the Sam Alexander Nova series that I have.
Yep.
Because that series started with Jeff Loeb in the first volume, and then it kind of rotated authors for a while, and I think Gerry Duggan was one of them that worked on that. So I am familiar with his work. And in that one too, I couldn't really tell that we'd changed writers when they switched to him. So to me, that's a good sign. Like I like to see some kind of continuity with character development and stuff like that. And so it's frustrating when you go to a new writer and they're like, we're going in this other 360 direction, which actually that's something that happened with Batgirl after the volume that we reviewed in Gail Simone's run. There was somebody else that came on that was like, we're going to take her in a completely different direction. And I was like, I don't like this. It's not as good, you know? So yeah, I give him major props for that. Yeah.
Well, and that's what makes this fun is that the way that the characters feel is consistent with what you would have been reading around this time, and we put them together and they actually go on a mission together and need to cooperate, and they do get into some scrapes and fights with each other, but overall they come out on top essentially, even though Black Cat escapes to cause mayhem another day. But it's a
Right.
good kind of like little mini arc that they get to go through, and it's fun, and
Sure.
it feels like the characters, because a lot of it seems like a lot of these kind of limited series, they either go off in a weird direction or they find some reason that just doesn't make any sense to force two characters together, either to fight or to have a team up or whatever. And it's just like, it makes it hard to get into. Whereas I felt like this one, it was so easy to get into because it was a fun story.
Yeah.
And the characters were consistent and they were fun and they riffed off of each other really well too.
Yeah, there wasn't anything like with the Cloak and Dagger series that we read where I was coming into it with the baggage of all their previous continuity. And that was another like kind of mini that was made just to capitalize on the fact that there was a TV show. But they were doing stuff like having them being shocked by killing, and I'm just like, that's not who Cloak and Dagger are. Like, they don't seem to, like, they don't just kill anybody, but killing a drug pusher is not something that is like beneath them or whatever. So this didn't feel like that, where it was a writer going, let's take a hard left into, my story.
Let's bring Hawkeye in and
was,
let him start killing people because Deadpool has that influence on him and we have to change
right,
the tone.
Right. And it's, it's kind of like anything with, like sitcoms, right? You know the characters going into the thing. So the interesting thing is, what is the gang going to get up to this week that's going to be funny, basically? And you already have the characters established. And so all the comedy and stuff comes out of who they naturally are. So I kind of felt like this book was the same way, where like it even struck me reading this, how like the Deadpool movie, sometimes like they go so far over the top with the comedy and stuff. They do so much of the fourth wall breaking stuff, and everything in this just felt like more natural. And it's weird to say that it felt almost more like grounded and stuff in their characters than like the movie persona of Deadpool does. But I really enjoyed it a lot, as far as just like it felt like all the jokes were very natural. They were just coming out of the situations, and there wasn't anything where I was like, oh, they just like inserted a joke here for no reason. So I think the characterization being on point made the humor work as well. So
and taming Deadpool down a little bit through his daughter.
Yeah.
Because our story is about Shield information that could be very damaging or life-threatening to the people who are in those files. Well, his daughter and the Shield agent that are protecting her are on that list. So if he botches this and doesn't recover it and makes things worse, then his daughter's in trouble. So he still has to calm things down a little bit. Now he does again show up in Hawkeye's classic outfit riding a Skycycle and zoom across the sky in a rescue attempt. So he does do crazy zany Deadpool things, but he's not quite as like unchained as he would be if he was just out there by himself doing something that didn't have any ramifications for anybody that he actually cared about.
Yeah, I really felt like he felt less like an anti-hero in this story, but in a way I was kind of able to get behind him a little bit more, because he didn't feel like he was just going to go on a murder spree at any moment either. Whereas sometimes, especially like the really early comics with him where he was more of an antagonist, it's like, yeah, he's going to kill people. And so like, you better watch out. Like, he might be funny, but like people die when he's around. And, so yeah, I didn't feel that sense of like menace or threat from him. It was more just like fun to have him around as like a zany kind of cartoon character, but I mean, they kept it grounded enough that it still fits in that superhero world with Hawkeye and the Avengers and everything.
They didn't do much fourth wall breaking. I think there was like one moment where they sort of did a little bit, and he looked at the camera, but that was kind of it.
Yeah, I was kind of glad that stuff was a little more subtle this time, because I do feel like it can be one of those things where it's like, all right, here's the joke, the fourth wall joke that we all attacked because that's like his thing. And like, I get that that's his thing, but I feel like you can overuse it too. Yeah. So I really, the humor in this one just like worked for me really well, like more so than even the Secret Invasion story that we reviewed last time. Like I just really like all the jokes landed for me. Like I felt like they were all justified. And I mean, I had put this for later in the notes, but we can talk about it now. My favorite gag by far was when he is getting the Skycycle and he starts singing Queen And
Oh,
he's
yeah.
like, I want to ride my Skycycle. And I could just like hear it I was like, oh my gosh, if Ryan Reynolds was like performing this, it would be so funny. And so that was a great moment. Like that was my favorite joke of the whole thing. But there were things like all throughout, even the running gag of like the kids being mad about the candy and stuff, like got a few chuckles out of me as I was reading. So
Yeah. But unfortunately, what was not funny were the weird cartoon-like facial expressions on everyone else when they saw Deadpool doing something weird. And it wasn't just once in that moment. It was like every character just like over and over where they're reacting to something and it's like super exaggerated in a cartoony way. But then there are panels where people look normal. They look like, you know, realistic in that art style. They look like the right character. Everything's fine. And then in the next panel, we've got Kate Bishop going.
Yeah, so Kate
like
was
overacting.
by far. Kate felt like the most overacting in the entire story, and it was almost every time she reacted to something. I was noticing that. I felt like Clint was very on model for his character, and he wasn't like too exaggerated most of the time. And I felt, you know, for the most part, the same way for Deadpool. But for some reason, Kate from the get-go, her face felt kind of like really thin and like elongated. And I don't know. I didn't care for
because like
how
in her,
either penciler
her comics, it's
really
a little kind of
it's a little more rounded. Yeah.
And she doesn't have those weird like facial reactions that are just like extreme and cartoony. And I know I've seen it before in other books too, where it's like it's just the reaction shots.
Yeah, it did take me out of it. Like it was enough that it was distracting for me, specifically with her character. I think maybe there were some moments with Dr. Lusk where maybe he looked a little cartoony, but with him, I was like, he's kind of like the mad scientist character, so I can forgive that a little bit more. Kate is a character that we like want to take more seriously. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if this is that artist not being as comfortable with drawing female faces or like what that was necessarily, but I really didn't care for the way she was depicted. Well, really just her face. Like everything else about her, like her outfit was on model, like everything looked right. It was
even Clint has
reactions. Oh yeah, that's really
he looks like a Ken, and he's like smiling like a goof, and it's just like really cartoony, and it's so weird because like in the other shots or when there's action or something, he's like groaning in pain or he's tired or whatever, and he looks like a regular comic that you would see of Hawkeye, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I'm a Ken doll, I'm a cartoon. Hello.
So look in the beginning, because there are some issues that were passed off to the guest penciler, or maybe just parts of issues. That's one reason why it was more distracting to me, is because there are a couple of issues where they have both pencilers working on that issue. And so there will be a change from Matteo Lolli to Campagni, or how I say that the other penciler's name. And I'm so sorry for butchering it, but for the other guy, they would switch to him even midway through an issue, and I would assume to get the book out on time is probably why that kind of stuff happens. But unfortunately, so what you want to do as an editor or somebody that is overseeing a comic book is you want to find artists whose styles complement each other. But I really noticed every time it switched, so it was really distracting to me because one was more cartoony than the other. So
a lot more.
Lolli, I didn't notice doing that stuff quite as much, but I still didn't care for how he drew Kate's face. So these are nitpicks, yes, but they're things that I noticed while I was reading the story, and that they were just kind of like mild irritants where I was like, oh, they could have like sold that moment a little bit better if it wasn't so over the top. So I totally agree with you.
So it was kind of funny too how we got like Deadpool pulling his mask down but just showing his mouth, because in the comics Hawkeye is super deaf at this point from all the explosions and all the trauma that he's endured.
Clear, Docs, I want you just because I need you.
Oh. What happened?
Too hard to tell. I don't.
And that's kind of the shtick with Hawkeye is basically he's kind of like Daredevil in that he gets the crap kicked out of him and he gets back up and he goes back the next day, even though he's a regular human who doesn't have accelerated healing or any of that stuff. He has this one thing that he does really well, and everything else just takes a toll on him. So he's deaf at this point, and he's reading lips in order to kind of accommodate for not being able to hear people, especially when they have a mask and they start turning like this and harder. So he lifts it up so that Hawkeye can read his lips while he's talking. So it's kind of funny to see Deadpool throughout this in his, typical red mask and outfit with, his jaw sticking out, and you can see the like big pepperoni spots on his face because he looks, hideous. And that's how they've drawn him in this, is he basically has these like red splotches all over him. And so that was kind of interesting.
He's just got places where his musculature is just exposed to the air because there's no skin there. One thing I was going to say that I did enjoy about the art is there is a moment early on in the book where they start to do a sequence reminiscent of David Aja's work on Fraction's run, where it's showing all the visual clues that Hawkeye is taking from things. And at a certain point, Deadpool starts complaining about it, and he's like, "What are we doing here?
Yeah.
And I can't understand or follow any of this." And so that was actually a very nice fourth wall breaking moment, especially because me as a reader, I felt like this penciler wasn't communicating just the visual stuff as well either. So it was almost like the writer and the artist going like, we're just going to make fun of this and be like, hey, we're not going to do this. So we're just going to pull his mask up so that people can actually hear him. Yeah. I did like that. I thought that was pretty successful. So there are moments of the art that I did enjoy, and by and large, it didn't take away from the story. But yeah, it was those moments where it veered into becoming very cartoony that it took me out of it.
Well, and we got a lot of variation too. Like there are some issues that begin like from Deadpool's perspective, and he's like, okay, how did I get here and what am I doing? And then Hawkeye has one, and then Kate has one too, where she's like, hey, this is a typical day and I'm chasing down people and I'm looking for Clint, and he's been taken over, he's been mind controlled and all this stuff while they're chasing after him. And so it's neat to see like all this variation that we get in the storytelling of making reference to Hawkeye comics, making reference to things in Deadpool comics, like random ghosts showing up, and then giving each character kind of like a spotlight or a highlight moment for them to kind of hear their inner dialogue and what they've got going on and see things from their perspective. It seemed like we did a lot in a very small amount of time.
Yeah.
Like usually when we read limited series like this that are just, like 5 issues, our complaint is they packed way too much into a short amount of time, and it should have been a 10 or 12 issue story arc so that we could really flush out everything that there is to do within this story. Whereas I feel like this one finally nailed it, where we got in, we told a cool story, we did some fun stuff, and the stakes were well enough for the characters that we had. It wasn't like it was going to destroy the whole world. It was, very targeted. And then we resolved it, but we didn't resolve it in a way where now we're stuck with a new status quo that we have to deal with in the solo books. Everything kind of goes back to the status quo, but our characters have learned something because they had an experience. Like, Hawkeye had the experience of turning somebody away and not giving them the time of day and listening to them and finding out that it was actually something important. So he needs to be a little bit more careful. So it's like he got some character growth, but it wasn't like it changed his character radically. It was just enough that he came out of the story with something that he didn't have when he went into it. And I think that's really a great thing to get from a limited series that's really short, is the character had an experience and did learn something. And while it may not change them fundamentally, it at least was something that you feel like, okay, they went through something. Like it actually happened. Yeah. Instead of a throwaway story that's just kind of, okay, it happened and nobody knows, nobody cares, and it has no ramifications.
I felt like there were ramifications for Clint, but I also felt like they weren't really consequential, or they didn't really matter a whole lot, because it was just kind of like, well, you need to, pay more attention to people that are coming around your apartment, I guess, or something. It didn't feel like it's going to change a whole lot moving forward. And it it almost felt like too for me where it was one of those things where could he really have avoided this whole mess? Like maybe if he listened to the guy, he could have kept him from getting killed. But as far as all the stuff with the drones and all that that was going on, like that was still probably going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was, I don't know. I wasn't sure if I felt like the arc even needed to be there that much because it was a nice little concluding point for the story, I guess, though. It was nice to have a point to be like, okay, we've kind of wrapped this up. And, you know, Clint is recognized that, yeah, maybe I made a mistake. But I also didn't feel like his mistake was anything that was so big that it was like, you need to go through a major change to like rectify this in the future. Because I was like, well, anybody could have done that. Anybody could have just been like, well, who is this guy knocking at my door going, help, Avenger? Like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
Like, he could be a crazy. So I don't know.
That's interesting.
I guess I didn't blame Clint that much for that because I was like, I didn't think that was such a bad thing. But then, I mean, it for that guy, it was because he literally got killed 5 minutes later. So, I mean, it was, but yeah, I didn't think the arc was really that significant. But I also didn't care because it was a fun story. So I was just along for the ride and I enjoyed it anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a little more positive than that because it's something that's personal to Hawkeye. Like, it's not something that would really bother Captain America. It's not something that would bother the other guys. But for Hawkeye, he is the guy on the street. You know, he's the guy who's talking to your regular Joe as he walks by to get a cup of Joe or goes to the grocery store or whatever. Like, Hawkeye literally wears like a black T-shirt with a purple arrowhead on his shirt as he's just, you know, casual Clint walking down the street. So for him to have a situation where somebody came to him for help and he turned them away, that's significant for him, I feel like. Because in the day-to-day world of, you know, living, he's not living on the street, but he is in a low kind of income apartment complex. And there's a lot of talk about that throughout the Matt Fractions run, is how, you know, basically he's kind of like on hard times and he's either on outs with the Avengers and they're not paying as much, or there's just too many crises and there's not enough money to go around. So he's kind of living low for a little bit, which is fine because that's kind of more his natural beat anyway. Like, he likes to be on the street. He likes to talk to people and be personal with him. It's just when they get a little too personal with him, he withdraws. I feel like he's got like a little bit of introvert in there where he's like, you know, I don't mind being recognized. I don't mind being a public figure. I don't mind helping people at the drop of a hat and sacrificing to help them, but maybe just keep a little bit of distance. And it's almost like the hearing loss thing helps him to distance himself from people because he can't hear them. He has to read their lips. So it's kind of like putting a barrier between him so he doesn't get too personal and show them who he really is. So then he has this guy who's asking him for help like any other guy would. And he's like, you know what? I'm frustrated. I've had a bad day. You know, whatever. Just go on your way. You're just another nut job. And then find out that this was actually important Avengers business that I turned away. Like, it seemed kind of more monumental to his personal character, but yeah, not something that's going to affect him, you know, in the next story that's told. It's not like now he's gonna, every single person, do you have a problem? Do you need help? What's going on? He's not gonna freak out, but it's still something personal to him that he went through that's like, okay, you know, I need to just take this little step back and cool it. Like a small little life lesson.
Yeah, I can see that. I guess I'll rescind my thoughts about that then. I think that you have reread Fractions Run more recently than me. Because I if I'm not mistaken, did you reread it around the time the show hit? Or on Disney Plus or something like that? Yeah, so it's been since it was new since I've read it. So it's been a lot longer. So I'll kind of defer to your superior Hawkeye characterization judgment there because you're just more familiar with him. And that makes sense that it's true that wouldn't happen to Captain America because Cap would immediately take the person seriously and be like, let's go get to the bottom of this, or what, you know, I mean, he would, if he was in that situation, he definitely wouldn't turn the person away. So yeah, that's very true that it's like unique to his situation. And I also hadn't thought about how the hearing loss allowed him to kind of push people away a little bit. That was a lot of the Fraction run, wasn't it? Was that like, he was kind of like I'm doing the loner thing. Don't help me. And
Yeah.
Kate was like, you need help because you're not going to survive a lot of what's going on, even with these like insane Russian tracksuit guys. Like, if I don't help
Bro.
you, so bro,
bro,
come on,
watch out,
bro.
What are you doing,
So
bro?
happy that they brought that into the TV show.
We got you now, bro.
Why you making it so tough on us, bro?
Oh, that was awesome.
So great.
Yeah, there's like
Something I
there's like
never
a-
expected to see
a
in live
chase
action.
sequence and a whole bunch of stuff that's like literally like I'm looking at the comic and watching the screen like, wow, they just
Yeah.
did this and did that. That was a fun
Yeah. It was so satisfying. Yeah, so I mean, I guess I'll take that back. I would agree that it has character ramifications, even if it's not like a big polar shift in his attitude or anything
Yeah.
like that. So,
It wasn't as
yeah.
much for Deadpool. It was more just him kind of protecting himself. And that's why I
Sure.
say, like, it seems like more often than not, his daughter is just used as an excuse to get him involved and tame him down a little
Yeah.
bit and make him a little bit more careful. So I feel like that's kind of what they did here, and it worked, and it made the story come together. But I don't think there was anything that necessarily came out of it for him as like a learning lesson. And with Kate, I mean,
Right.
basically everything's about her proving that she is good enough to be Hawkeye. So I feel like that was kind of natural for her.
she seems like she's better than Hawkeye most of the time.
kind of does.
I don't
yeah.
know. Like
It's like I
she
do what he
doesn't
does,
screw
but
up
better.
as much as he does. Yeah. Yeah, like she seems more competent most of the time. And it's not I don't know that it's more competent. It's just that like she's younger, she hasn't been beat down as many times as Clint. And so I feel like she brings some like youthfulness to their partnership that maybe he can't muster up on his own. It is kind of fun because Marvel doesn't do the legacy stuff nearly as much as DC. And it's really nice to have a character at Marvel that experiments with that. And I think that I enjoy having Hawkeye and Hawkeye together more than just one of them on their own. So it's really fun to have them play off of each other.
Yeah, well, and they're also kind of they're different too. Like, yeah, they have the Hawkeye thing and the archery thing in common, but Kate's path is kind of more like like an illegal PI. So she kind of goes down the path of like a private investigator, but she doesn't get a license and start a practice like Jessica Jones. She more just kind of like snooping and investigating and finding things out and then hitting her target later. Whereas Hawkeye is kind of more of your like traditional heroic character where he's self-sacrificing, he's interested in the greater good. He wants to see, things go well for his common man and then also help out in the like high stakes things that go on in the Avengers. Whereas Kate's in the Young Avengers and she is more just kind of like, I want to get out there and see what I can do. I want to test myself. I want to see how well I can get out there and make a name for myself. And Hawkeye's like, I want to stay out of the light. I want people to leave me alone. He's kind of like the more like seasoned, grizzled veteran who's just like, I'm just tired of it. And she's kind of like, yeah, oh, we get to go on a case. We get to find something. We get to shoot some bad guys. Yeah, let's get them.
Yeah,
so they're different.
Yeah,
that
it
way.
is.
So
It
makes
is nice to have them play off of each other in that way. And I think that brings me to something that I was thinking about as I was reading this. I was almost wondering because I know that it has been hard for them to get any kind of Hawkeye ongoing really off the ground since Matt Fraction stopped writing. I think part of it is just the legacy of that writer and knowing that he did something really cool and going, okay, well, if we tell another story with Hawkeye, it needs to be like really worth telling and really worth continuing on from that point. But do you think that that he needs an ongoing title or that it's better to do these sort of like concise miniseries with like a real beginning, middle, and end? Because that was something that I actually really enjoyed about this was that it was 5 issues. It was a complete story. It was very like digestible and it felt kind of satisfying for all the characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say because I think this one is kind of an exception where it seems like I said before, most of the ones that we read are not that way, where things are either forced or there's too much in just a short amount of time and it's hard to keep track of. And then we get out and then it's like, well, what happened? What changed? Why did we even have this story if everything was just going to wrap up neatly and then, no one cares? And this is a little
or like Edenwood where it was like, we basically got through the world building and then the story was over.
Yeah, but still, there are going to be more issues of that, so you
Right,
can't really
yeah,
fault
that's
it
true,
for,
that's true.
you know, if you pick up the next set of issues and you're like, okay, now that I know what's going on, maybe it would be a really enjoyable story because you're past that whole point. Whereas with 5
Right.
issues, you don't have time to do that, because if you do your world building in the first 4, then that leaves you 1 issue to tell the entire story, because that's it. So you
Right.
have to take a little bit of time to give us the stakes, give us the backstory, and then put us right in. And they have the advantage here of these are 2 well-known characters, and they had runs
Right.
going on at the time that were well-known as well, so they didn't have to explain a whole lot of what was going on. They could just kind of show you, and then if you're a fan and you've read it before, you'll see it and go, oh, that makes sense. That's from, you know, this comic. That's cool. Or you'll see it and you'll go, well, that's just Deadpool. He does crazy things, so that just kind of makes sense. So
Sure.
they have
Yeah.
a lot working for them in this. But I think, like, that you have to rotate things to keep them fresh. Like a character probably shouldn't have an ongoing series that's just ongoing forever and ever and ever, because they like
Right.
to do those resets or reboots or change the status quo, or let's take him in a different direction. Because if you keep it going on for too long, you're kind of stuck down one path. Like this whole hearing loss thing with Hawkeye, that's kind of like a character trait at this point in time. But how
Sure.
long until that gets old? So
Right.
maybe Hawkeye's book needs a break, and then it needs to come back with a new issue 1 where he doesn't have that problem anymore, and we can go in a different direction. Now maybe it's something else, or maybe he's, I don't know, colorblind, and that matters because he wears purple, or I don't know, you know, something different. But
I can't see my arrowheads. They're all purple.
Which arrow do I have? Is it a trick arrow, a glue arrow, a regular one, a corkscrew? What is it? I can't see. It's purple.
Yeah, he really doesn't need to have vision problems. That's not okay for that character.
But
Fine
that
for
could be-
Daredevil.
That
Not-
could be something that could be something that he has to work through, right? Because now
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
affecting
yeah.
his performance at work, essentially, and he has to figure out how to cope with that. So that could be a story point to investigate for a while, to take the character somewhere new where he hasn't been before. And then when that gets old, we just cut that, end it, and we start a new issue 1 after
Sure.
some time has passed to, you know, go a different direction.
Yeah.
I think that's the way to do it.
I like long runs on characters that are kind of universe mainstays, but I think the appeal of the characters that aren't quite at the A-list is that you can put them through more status quo changes and people will accept it. Like Hawkeye didn't always have hearing loss, for instance. He didn't always live in a crummy apartment in New York. He used to live in the mansion with the rest of the Avengers, you know, and wear a mask that looked like Quickman from Mega Man 2. You know, that was they can make changes to him. There's right behind you on the other side, you have some Hawkeye in that mask. Right at your
yeah,
eye
here we
level
go.
there. Yeah.
I knew I had it somewhere.
I was like, I know where it is.
I
Yeah.
can't see the Hawkeyes for the trees or the forest.
Yeah, so I mean that like characters that are A-listers with, I mean, in Superman being around since 1938 is kind of the big example I can think of this, but like they've tried multiple times to like hook him up with other love interests. For instance, like New 52, they're like, it's new, everything's different, so we're gonna put him with Wonder Woman. That's his girlfriend for like these 5 years, and Lois is just like a reporter in Metropolis that's investigating stuff. What happened though was that then Lois became a character that kind of had no point in Superman stories because they were like trying to find ways to shoehorn her in without her knowing Clark's secret or any of that stuff. And it was just weird. Like it didn't work very well. And so there are things about like these A-list characters that people just, they're so ingrained by now that it's been like 80 or 90 years of history that you can't change them or people riot. But that's the fun of characters at Hawkeye's level, you know, is like, he's not Captain America, he's not Iron Man or Thor. And so I feel like you can tinker with the formula more and people don't get as upset about it. And that's what I really love about some of the street level heroes. And you know, I mean, I've brought up Hawkman a million times, but he's another one. You can keep reinventing him and it basically always works because, you know, it's fine. Like you want another take on him. Okay. It's another reincarnation of him. Sure. Like that's not a problem. So yeah, I would kind of agree with you, except that like I think there are certain characters that having an ongoing going forever, like Spider-Man, there's always going to be an amazing Spider-Man book.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like that's how Marvel keeps the lights on, basically. But is like that and their X-Men titles. But some of these characters, it is nice to rest them like that and then bring them back when you actually have a story that you're really passionate about telling.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I did feel like this story was worth telling. Before we move to final thoughts, I know this is running a little bit long. I have one more thing that I did want to bring up though, which is I find it fascinating how Black Cat's character has developed over the years, because she and the Catwoman character started in very similar places in Marvel and DC, where it's like you're sort of the cat burglar, sort of like sexy love interest for the hero that sort of brings him down a little bit or makes him a little more morally gray, because he kind of like Batman would kind of let stuff go with Catwoman that maybe he shouldn't, and maybe Spider-Man might overlook some things with Felicia because he knows her and they've been as friendly as they are. But Catwoman has very much over the last 20 years been undergoing the transformation from villain to anti-hero to now basically just superhero. Where she's not really a villain at all anymore. And if she is, it's only that some of her methods are more extreme than what Batman might use, but maybe she like steals a jewel here and there, but she's also like protecting people in poverty and, giving back to the community and stuff. And it seems like what they've done with Black Cat is they're like, let's take her the opposite direction. Let's make her start killing people again and like make her actually truly evil. And I know that that's not popular with everybody, but I kind of like how those two characters at the different companies have diverged from the same idea.
Yeah. Like Felicia was like, she cared about wildlife and exhibits and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so she would steal jewels or she would do things to expose where people are mistreating animals. And Catwoman, I think, had similar stories.
Yeah.
And so, they were pretty similar for a while. But yeah, Felicia, I want to say it was Spider-Man run, maybe like early 2010s or a little before, where, and maybe I'm completely wrong, so I apologize. Let me know in the comments. But at one point where she was the villain character. She was the person who was the mafia boss. She was the crime lord. She was kind of like the hidden partner, crime mastermind for quite a while. Or she was like the second level to somebody else who was like some shadowy figure, but she was basically running the crime that was going on. And it seemed like we had her in that state for quite a while, where that's where what she was doing, where she was going the villainous route and basically like, I'm only going to, like, she's the one who's overlooking something. So instead of the hero overlooking something she does, she's overlooking the hero. Yeah, you meddled and I should probably kill you, but I'm not going to, whatever. Let's have some fun, have some bad luck, have some laughs, and then I'll escape in the end. So it's okay because you're never going to catch me. And we kind of did that routine for a while.
Yeah, it seems like she's gone down a little bit darker path. I remember I have some Daredevil issues by Mark Waid where she appears and she's working like directly with Madame Mask and some people from Hydra. And I was just like, wow, I did not expect that from her, because I don't know, I always viewed her more like morally gray, kind of in between. So that was surprising to me. But I remember asking you about it at the time and you being like, well, they're kind of making her a little more villainous now. Like that's kind of the direction her character's going. So I like that they found her own direction for her character so that she doesn't feel, similar to anything from the other company. And I mean, I know the bad luck thing sets her apart and the characters are not fundamentally the same, but on the surface level, I like that they've made those changes.
Well, and she got her own kind of mini-series for a while as well. Wow. So like this one is called Grand Theft Marvel instead of Grand Theft Auto, which nice. I think I actually reviewed this as part of Spidey Joe's one-shots, I think. I don't even remember if I reviewed it or not. I know I've read it, but yeah, so she turns into the, more of a villainous, and she's thieving and conspiring and running the mafia basically. And Yeah, it's
Right.
kind of fun, and it makes her different, and it makes her not feel like a copy of Catwoman anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I have anything else. So, are you ready to move to final thoughts?
Let's do final thoughts.
Green light,
Comics, comics,
green light,
comics, 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 comics.
because they have no home.
So essentially, I kind of mentioned it before that basically, like, usually we don't get this with a limited series, that it actually kind of gets in, tells you something, gives you a little bit of something, and then goes on. And it's a self-contained story that feels like we got something. There were some stakes for our characters, not, like
Right.
steak, like dinner steak, but steak like,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
there was something personal, and it was personal for Deadpool and something personal for Hawkeye to go through. And so it wrapped up very neatly at the end, but I think that, it had to, and it makes sense for a story like this that's kind of more like, this is like a fun little spin-off episode that we got to do with these characters. And I really enjoyed it. I think I would give this one a 4.75. Like, I really don't want to quite give it a 5 out of 5 bananas, because it's not quite, I wouldn't say like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever, you should definitely read it. But it's really good, and I really enjoyed it. And if you appreciate Hawkeye and Deadpool, you'll enjoy it. If you've read the comics around this era that the characters are in, you're really going to like it. So I think it's a win-win for anybody picking it up. Maybe somebody who's never got into comics before, would this really be the first comic that you get into? Maybe not. But I think for anybody who's
I don't know. I mean,
read Marvel,
I think it's pretty easy to follow.
Yeah.
I do think it's pretty easy to follow, and I think that's one of its strengths, actually, is that it isn't, and maybe that's just me coming off of Edenwood last week, where it was like way too much information.
Yeah.
It was such a breath of fresh air to get to something that I was like, all right, I have built-in knowledge. I can just kind of read this. I don't have to really pay attention to trying to track a lot of new lore and stuff like that. So, yeah,
4.75 for me. What about you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to give it a 4.25. I don't think it's necessarily anything groundbreaking. And like I said before, the story arc before didn't quite have me on the hook where I was like, oh, what an important moment for Hawkeye or anything. But at the same time, it was just so much fun to see these characters going through the adventure that they went through. And so I was really happy that we read this story. I was really happy that I had the opportunity to revisit this era of Hawkeye. And
So for those of you who are listening to the podcast, I'm inching towards the edge of the frame, looking at Mike, trying to break the fourth wall. Like, it'd be awesome if somebody else in a Deadpool costume could walk behind you and make it look like I walked off the camera. That would be fun.
What you're breaking is my train of thought.
I'm super distracting, so just so you know, that's what's going on. Check it out on YouTube at Boneless Comics Podcast. Woo!
That's right. But yeah, I would give it a 4.25. It's a really fun story. I think it's a little better than a 4, and like you said, also not quite a 5. There are a couple minor complaints. Again, like the cartoony art at parts was a little bit of a drawback, but there's really not anything super wrong with it, and it was really a breath of fresh air to read something that was just simple and digestible, especially after last week. So I think that's going to do it for me. That's going to make the average of 4.5, which I think is very fair for this story. So
yeah. All right, awesome. Well, that is a wrap on our review. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode of We Like Comics Because They Have No Bones. Make sure that you rate us on your podcast platform of choice, and also comment, like, and subscribe on YouTube. And be sure to check out our after shows where the discussion continues.
That's right. We will be talking a little bit about the creators, so make sure to check that out. Yeah. And tell us what you think of this comic by posting on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast or on Blue Sky Social at Boneless Comics 1 using the hashtag Boneless Comics Podcast for all of your questions and comments. So next episode, we're going to be taking a look at our reviews from 2024, and we will give you a sneak peek at upcoming reviews for 2025.
Should be a fun time. Well, thank you so much for a great 2024. Thanks for hanging with us. Hopefully you've enjoyed our comic reviews, and next time you see us, we'll be talking about all the things that we reviewed, and we'll be reviewing ourselves. So be kind of
That's
like
right.
fourth wall breaking. All right.
Yeah,
well, thanks, everybody.
a little bit of that.
And have a happy new year.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Green light,
Comics
big cross.